The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
The webinar will begin in 30 seconds. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are joining us from today. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Peter O'Neill, and I am the president of Find Biometrics and Mobile ID World. Be sure to stay on top of all the breaking news by visiting Find Biometrics, or if mobility is your focus, Mobile ID World. Now in our 12th year, we cover the markets like no one else, with in-depth articles, insights, the latest yearly review of our industry, newsletters, interviews with the leaders in this space, and of course, our webinar series. We are very pleased that you are joining us today for this very important IBIA special webinar presentation, Privacy and the Commercial Use of Biometrics. The IBIA has again demonstrated its leadership position in the identification industry by bringing together our three panelists today to start the dialogue around privacy, biometrics, and identification. And the timing could not be better. With the recent Apple security breaches, it is once again obvious that passwords have outlived their usefulness. We have a lot to cover today, so I'm going to jump right in. Please note, to ask a question, just type it into the dialog box in your go-to control panel on the right side of your screens at any time. Don't wait until the end. This will give us an opportunity to manage your questions. We will do our best to answer as many as possible at the end. There will be many questions because of this very important topic. This webinar will last about 40 minutes in total and will be recorded and available at mobileidworld.com. I would like to now take this opportunity to thank our sponsors for their continuing support, NEC, Cognitech, Safran Morpho, and BioKey. And now to our first presenter. We are very pleased to have Christopher Calabrese from the ACLU with us today. Chris is the Legislative Counsel for Privacy-Related Issues in the American Civil Liberties Union, Washington Legislative Office, where his portfolio includes Internet privacy and new surveillance technologies. He has testified before Congress and appeared in many media outlets including CBS Evening News, the New York Times, Washington Post, and the Associated Press. Chris is a graduate of the Harvard University and holds a JD from the Georgetown University Law Center. I would now like to hand the presentation over to Chris.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you having me on the webinar and the chance to share the ACLU's perspective on both on the issue of privacy and biometrics. So, I think the first thing for folks to understand is that we're not here. The ACLU's goal is not to demonize biometrics, even with a cute little demon like this. All technologies, or almost all technologies, have both positives and negatives. And our goal is to share what we view as the negative areas so that folks like you can be aware of what we think and hopefully, you'll see some of those concerns and share them as well. We can curb those negative consequences and promote the positive ones. So with that being said, why does the ACLU care about biometrics and what are the concerns that we see? And so I think the first thing to understand, and if you don't take anything else from this, you'll take this point. The fact that you are in public does not mean you have no privacy. And that's something that sometimes is counterintuitive to folks, but I think if you spend a minute thinking about it, you'll see that it makes sense, especially for professionals who work in biometrics. When we're in public, of course, it's natural that other people are going to see us. But what we don't expect is to have our movements recorded and permanently stored. So it's one thing to say, oh, I might see somebody out in public. It's another thing to say there is a mechanism here that will record my visit to an abortion clinic or a gun shop or a bar or a mosque. We don't expect that what's going to happen is that those things will be stored and potentially seen by the government, seen by private corporations. And when we talk about this, there are some sort of very real civil liberties consequences. Of course, the first is protest. Anonymity in protest is crucial to a democracy. So if I'm out in a protest rally and I know that the government is literally able to both identify and catalog me as I'm protesting, that could have a chilling effect on my willingness to go out there and express my First Amendment rights. And of course, this type of anonymity in public is foundational in the United States. This is a picture of which Publius, there we go, which was actually Alexander Hamilton, J. But they understood that they needed a level of anonymity in order to express their views. So this sort of anonymity is fundamental to our society. It's not sort of a new idea. The second core, so that first piece, that this kind of anonymity and privacy is crucial to democracy. The second piece is that if you build it, they will come. I don't know why it wants me to change the color scheme, but I'm just going to ignore that. And this is my if you build it, they will come slide. If you systems for collecting and accessing biometrics can end up directly in the hands of governments, they can end up in the hands of corporations, and they can be used for lots of reasons that the builders might not have intended. And there's a couple of ways that can happen. Governments can directly collect biometrics from private entities, either through court orders, either by having third parties like data brokers collect those biometrics and then sell them or share them with the government. This, of course, is particularly salient for things not just like face recognition, but things like photographs. We know how connected fingerprints. We know how directly fingerprints are connected with the idea of use in criminal investigations, and I think many people would be concerned if they thought the fingerprint that they shared with their gym was somehow going to end up in the hands of the police. So it's, if you build a system to collect this stuff, you have to recognize that there will be other actors who may want to get their hands on it. Similarly, biometrics can be part of a larger system of privacy invasions. So you may think of biometrics as relatively anodyne or just a tool, but the fact is, if you've got an unfair system, and we do have some very unfair systems in this country, biometrics can be a tool for making those privacy invasions worse. So one example is terrorist watch lists. Right now, we have a very problematic terrorist watch list system in this country, one that has an exceptionally low standard that allows people to essentially be put on a terrorist watch list for things like a single uncorroborated source of information, like a Facebook post or a Twitter post. That can serve as a basis for putting someone on a watch list. There right now is really no system for finding out if you're on a watch list or for challenging your placement on a list. And if you're a biometrics vendor, you say, well, that's not my fault. I didn't do that. But the fact is that these terror watch lists then use and collect biometric information and use them to track the people on the list. So the system you have created can be misused. And while that may seem unfair, the fact is you have to understand that people who are concerned about these systems may also be concerned about biometrics. And similarly, the concern that biometric technologies will be linked into some of the broader systems that already exist, things like massive video camera systems. And suddenly, our movements, again, as I said, in public, linked to existing systems like video cameras, can suddenly become tools where we can be monitored by lots of different people. And this technology ultimately is very invasive. It can tell a lot about you. Things like face recognition can tell, can expose who your friends are. That's obviously why Facebook wants to use face recognition, to know, the people who in your circle are. It can expose who you associate with in your affiliations and photographs. It can reveal embarrassing photos that were previously basically pseudo-anonymous. If there's an embarrassing photo up but your name isn't next to it, it may as well not be up. But once face recognition enables that photograph to be linked to your identity, you have had lessened privacy, even if that photograph was previously accessible online. So and this is not a comprehensive list by any stretch, but just so folks understand, when I look at a face recognition system or a biometric system, what am I sort of immediately issue spotting for? One is, does the system get consent for collection of a face template? Am I getting people's permission first before I'm enrolling them in the system? Do I think this system is going to end up as a tool for either mass surveillance or the collection of sensitive information, i.e., tracking people, or being used in a context that I think may reveal very personal information? Are there protections against the sharing and sale of biometrics? If I've given up my fingerprint, to get my gym membership, do I then have to agree to that the person who collected that fingerprint can do whatever they want? Certainly the ACLU thinks the answer to that should be no. And then finally and relatedly, is the collection of a fingerprint or a face print for one reason going to be converted to another use? Ultimately, we all deserve privacy, and privacy is a core value. This is sort of a funny slide. It's Julian Assange, who is, of course, a famous WikiLeaks editor, saying, how the government always tells you if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. I'm just letting them prove it. And this is, of course, a joke. But the fact is that we all have things that are reasonable to hide. We don't always want that embarrassing photo that somebody put up on Facebook to now be linked to us forever. We don't want personal information about this. There's not nothing wrong with it, but I don't want my salary online. I don't want all kinds of other information online. It's okay to have privacy, and that's a core value that we need to protect, whether it's Americans' privacy or someone else's. So you can find more on this at our Free Future blog, which has a lot of our cutting-edge articles on biometrics and other technologies, and here is my personal information one last time. So thank you very much.
Chris, thank you very much for your presentation. I want to now introduce our second speaker, Walter Hamilton. Walter is a recognized industry authority and subject matter expert on biometric technology. He is a senior consultant with Identification Technology Partners, a consulting firm in the identity management field. He recently completed the 7th elected term as chairman and president of the International Biometric and Identification Association, and advocates the use of technology to determine identity and enhance security, privacy, productivity, and convenience. He currently serves as vice chairman of the IBIA. Walter, take it away.
Good morning, and thank you, Peter, for that kind introduction. I am looking forward to the discussion following this webinar. I also want to thank Chris for taking the time to participate in the webinar and share the ACLU's perspective on biometrics and privacy. For the biometrics industry to grow and prosper, we must be sensitive to the legitimate privacy concerns that are often raised, and we need to be part of a unified voice that advocates responsible biometric use. It is important that designers and implementers of biometric-based systems consider potential privacy impact early in the development process and incorporate appropriate policies and best practices to govern the use of such systems. Chris mentioned, for example, if you get on the terrorist watch list, it's very hard to get off, and that's probably very true. So whoever develops such systems needs to have a mechanism for correcting errors and redress for people that feel they've been harmed unfairly. And we agree with those kinds of principles. IBIA has for many years supported privacy principles that should be considered where they're appropriate, but only in the context of an application or intended use, not as a blanket one-size-fits-all policy. As an advocacy organization, IBIA is also engaged in outreach to policymakers, legislators, and the public to try to provide some education on how biometrics works and help dispel some of the myths and misperceptions and fears that exist around the technology. This morning I'm joined by my colleague at IBIA, Jim Jasinski, and Jim will frame the privacy considerations of biometrics in our digital age from IBIA's perspective. But first, I would provide a short background for those that might not be very familiar with the technology. First, just define the technology. What are we talking about here? Biometrics is the electronic identification of a person based on his or her physiological or behavioral characteristics. There's some variations on this definition, but that's the one that we generally see in accepted form. In the next slide, biometric modalities that not only include fingerprint and face recognition, which Chris had mentioned, but also include other modalities such as the iris pattern, the colored area around the pupil of the eye, vascular or vein patterns in various parts of the body, which could be the whites of the eye, could be the back of the hand, the finger, or the palm, or something like that. Also, the physical shape or physiology of the hand geometry, and various voice biometrics or speaker recognition, as it's often called. There are less common biometric modalities such as walking gait, ear shape, skin texture, and even body odor, if you can believe that. And even DNA is seen by many as a biometric modality as it evolves into a more rapid and automated method of identification. Next slide. Biometric technologies have several key benefits. First, it is important, it is convenient to use. And since it's always with you, as the old American Express commercial said, you can't leave home without it. It's also difficult to duplicate and nearly impossible to share. And it's fast and simple to use. It's a very important set of benefits when you think of it, say, in comparison to PIN numbers or passwords or carrying around a key fob or token of some kind for identification purposes. It's also important to understand that biometrics technology in and of itself does not characterize an individual by disclosing their age, gender, or race, and therefore would not be useful typically as a tool to discriminate against any group or class, and we certainly don't advocate that. Next slide. Biometrics really answers one of two questions depending on how it's implemented. Are you who you claim to be, or who are you? The first question usually is preceded by a claim of identity with the presented biometric sample matched against a previously registered sample for that specific record. The second question, and the one that perhaps has more privacy implications, is where there is no claim of identity and the biometric sample is matched against all of the previously collected biometric records in a data repository, such as a watch list that Chris was mentioning. And so if a person is on a watch list, then the match would occur and the result will be returned back to an investigator or some other person that would have responsibility for resolving or taking some appropriate action. Next slide. Biometrics has a long history in government use and in such applications as law enforcement, criminal investigation, you know, the old Miami CSI forensic use. It's also used for border security, screening of applicants for travel visas, social services benefits, and even driver's licenses. But in the commercial world, as the cost of the technology continues to fall, biometrics is now rapidly expanding into not only the business commercial use, but also in the consumer sector. Typical applications now include securing access to buildings, securing areas, and even homes. Logical access to computers and information systems by replacing or supplementing passwords or tokens. An example would be the Apple iPhone and other smart mobile devices that now a lot of people are carrying around in millions. Authenticating identity for mobile commerce transactions and even at the point of sale. It's also used for civil background checks to see if an applicant for a sensitive position of public trust has a criminal history. It provides, a non-repudiated audit history that positively confirms that a person performed a particular transaction or accessed a data record. And that's useful for regulatory compliance, such as the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act compliance for hospitals and other healthcare organizations. It's also used to make sure that professional exams are taken by the registered applicant and not by a paid test proxy. It's also used to expedite frequent known travelers through airport checkpoints. Particularly beneficial for international travel. You don't have to go through the immigration interrogation process. If you have your passport and your fingerprint, you can go to a kiosk and be immediately cleared. It also eliminates the problem and fraudulent buddy punching process that is a type of payroll fraud in employee time and attendance systems. In other words, if a person is clocking in, they can't clock in for someone else and defraud the payroll system. It's also important in some surveillance applications. And an example would be where a casino surveillance organization is looking for recognized card cheats or other undesirable characters that have been previously banned from a casino property. It's even used to validate theme park tickets to make sure that unused days on multi-day tickets are not sold on the black market. Disney World in Orlando is using the technology in that way. So the considerations for privacy vary extremely with each of these applications, and so it's very important that the designers and implementers of such systems be cognizant of the privacy implications of what they're building and develop the appropriate countermeasures that ensure that the use of the technology is both responsible and appropriate. And I'd like to now turn this over to Jim Jasinski, who will discuss IBIA's perspective on biometrics and privacy. Jim?
Before Jim starts in, I'd just like to give a little bit more of a formal introduction for our third presenter, James Jasinski, Senior Vice President, Digital Signal Corporation. Jim joined DSC in October of 2013. Prior to that, he spent 12 years as Executive Vice President with 3M Cogent. His responsibilities include the development, deployment, and operation of the biometric portion of the U.S. Visit program, as well as major biometric systems both within and outside the U.S. Jim also spent 23 years as a special agent for the Federal Bureau of Investigation and retired as a member of the Senior Executive Service. His last position at the FBI was the Program Manager for the development, deployment, and operation of the FBI's fingerprint matching system, the Integrated Automated Fingerprint Identification System. In this capacity, he worked with international, national, state, and local jurisdictions to develop standards and procedures for the exchange of biometric data, including serving as the chairman of the Interpol AFIS Expert Working Committee. Prior to joining the FBI, he was a practicing attorney in the state of New York. Wow, that's quite a bio, Jim. So over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Peter, for that introduction, and welcome to all listening on this discussion. What the IBI's position is that along the lines of what Chris was speaking about earlier, that we believe privacy and biometrics are
Muted.
associated with each other, that they have a mutual role and interconnection, but we believe that they're natural allies. What my agenda is going to consist of 4 parts: an overview of the process, the data capture and use, privacy issues, and conclusions, concluding comments, and specifically addressing where the IBIA's position is on privacy. The development of nature ideas, principles, applications, etc. is always a bumpy road.
Unmuted.
Questions and evolving answers.
Jim, can I
And
just
that
interrupt
was
for a
sort of
second?
acknowledged, I think, in Chris's comments.
Jim, can I interrupt for a second? Could you show your
Sure.
screen, please?
It's on.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Hang on, I'm
me
just
try
going
that
to.
again.
I'm just going to take it back, and we're going to just do this again. And now we're going to change it over to Jim. There we go.
Is it up? Let's see. I don't know what the problem is.
That's too bad.
Technology. We'll be with you in 1 sec. Okay, I'm going to try this one more time, Jim. I'm going to take
Okay.
back. Ah, there you
Let me
go.
try one more time myself.
There you go. We can see your screen
Okay.
now.
Yeah, just pulling it up there. And not the most auspicious start. There we go. Okay, is it up?
No.
We're seeing your desktop.
No? Ah, it's showing here. Huh. Let's try that again.
I'm not good. I got this. Maybe here.
You know, this never happened with a number 2 pencil.
Very true.
Try that again.
Just while Jim is getting this organized, if you do have a question, please again feel free to enter your question into the dialog box on the right-hand side of your screen. We have several questions already, and would appreciate you firing over your questions to us. Now, Jim, could we do this without slides?
Well, do you have a copy of my presentation?
I do not.
You do not. I thought we had sent it.
Yeah. Oh, hang on a second.
You might. I remember him sending it. You sent it to him. He's on the list.
We're seeing your screen, but we just can't seem to...
Yeah, I don't know why.
Is your presentation coming up there?
Well, it's on my screen.
Do you have more than one screen?
No, I don't. I've got the screen on the side. Show. Let's try this.
We got it.
You got it.
There you go.
Okay.
There we are.
Okay. So sorry about that. So what we're going to try again is start all over. The overview of the agenda I'm going to have is going to be divided into 4 parts. We're going to have an overview of the process. We're going to talk about data capture and use. We're going to talk about privacy issues, and then we're going to have some concluding comments regarding the position of the IBIA. The evolution of all ideas, principles, applications is always a bumpy road. It's always filled with new questions and evolving answers. that is also true of technology and privacy, which are currently going through that process, a process that probably has no end date because both privacy and technology are ever evolving. The end goal, though, is to achieve a balance and allow it to go position based upon the facts as they are and not as we wish they were. Multiple organizations are involved in a spirited debate over the capture, use, and protection of all data, whether private or public, whether biometric or non-biometric. And this discussion today is a part of that debate. All organizations use big data for multiple purposes. Even my fellow panelists, Chris and Walter, use big data. Biometrics of any modality is a part of big data, but also only proportionally a small part of that big data. While data can be stored in a variety of ways, our memory, which memory many times is distinct from that of our spouses, hard copy, digitally, etc., are all methods in which it can be stored. This is also true of biometric data, the memory of a face, a photograph. They're all stored electronically as a series of zeros and ones. However, what is distinctive about biometric data is that it does not independently reveal private information about an individual. In fact, it is a bridge separate and apart from private data. A picture does not tell us anything about the person, but it can provide a connection to other data that does. That means it can be used to create or prevent access to other data of an individual. While today we're discussing facial recognition systems, the principles apply to all biometrics. Simply stated, biometrics relies upon images to capture a template. No image, no template. Facial recognition relies upon images captured in a variety of ways. Once the image is captured, whether it's used in a facial recognition system or not, the data has been captured and stored. While facial images do not require contact for acquiring them, neither do a number of other biometrics in common use today: voice, speech patterns, heartbeats, gaits, iris, etc. The source of the image for the template can be visual, audible, or microscopic. These images are from public sources: walking in public, into a store, posting on Facebook, to name just a few methods. No one would propose that these images are not personal, but what private image is revealed from these public images is not from the biometric. What private information revealed is not from these public images, but rather what each individual privately knows or publicly knows about that individual. That includes information searched on big data. Actors, ages, the age of an actor, the sports stats, home prices, how many children we have, even our ages are all available independent of the biometric. But the biometric can be used to protect that information to the data. Biometric does not reveal any information that is not in the public image from which it drew its information. Restricting biometrics, therefore, does not diminish in any manner the data on an individual. Big data has many sources, resulting in data being aligned to the thousands of categories. The sources for that data are multifold. While a solution is to restrict collection, that is a task that is probably simpler to propose than to implement, primarily because there are so many methods, both known and unknown, of collecting information. The source for biometrics is known, namely the image captured, even if that capture is only through our eyes or ears. So if you can't restrict the capture, the focus must turn to protection and use. The tools from technological advancements, including biometrics, are inherently privacy neutral. But just as with any tool, the use of the tool determines its benefits and risks. Acceptable applications of tools always involve the triumvirate trade-off of security, convenience, and privacy. This process requires judgment, discretion, and understanding the facts and circumstances for the application. Data legally acquired, whether from private or public sources, is impossible to regulate. Since it is impossible to regulate the acquisition, then the focus has to be on the access and use of the collected data. It is based upon these conclusions the IBIA has crafted its principles for the responsible use and protection of biometric information. These principles are designed to support applications as defined by its context. The responsibility is of the user to consider these principles in their application. This is also consistent with current privacy policies of a variety of organizations that are part of big data. The advantage for biometric technology is that it is also inherently a tool that can protect access to the other data. And because it is using public images, it does so without recording data not already in the public domain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim, for your comments. I would now like to jump to our questions. We've received a number of questions, and so let's just start right in. The first question is, how can biometrics help protect against privacy threats like the recent compromising of Jennifer Lawrence's private photos? Walter, do you want to try that one?
Sure, Peter. I suppose that's a question that has to do with right of access to a file within a data repository. And assuming that it's an online cloud-based data repository, the access rights are typically based on a username and password, so that it would seem to me that if you wanted to have a high degree of assurance that only authorized users could access a specific set of records in that repository, that you would want to use some stronger method of authentication than a simple username and password, which individuals typically make very insecure because they're simple and easy to remember. So a biometric technology could supplant or replace passwords or PIN numbers in that example, and I think that would be an appropriate application.
Chris, could I get your take on that question? How can biometrics help protect against privacy threats?
Sure. I try not to opine too much on the technical side. I think we all have our competencies. I will say one of the things that's interesting to me about this question is, biometrics, as professionals, you obviously know, are not a magic solution. And I wonder if someone wanted access to Jennifer Lawrence's photos, creating a face template of Jennifer Lawrence would be extraordinarily easy. I mean, her photo is a million places. So someone who was technologically sophisticated enough to trick her into providing, into giving up her password, if that is indeed what happened, might also be sophisticated enough to create a template of her face and use that, to bypass whatever biometric controls are in place. Again, I don't think any of us know actually what happened in this particular circumstance yet. So this is all speculation, but I'm simply and I'm not disparaging biometrics. I'm simply noting there are no magic technical solutions to protecting privacy, just as there are no magic technical solutions to anything else. They are all, systems to prevent against threats that can be bypassed by persistent attackers in some cases.
Yeah, and this story is still unfolding, so it's a little early to really tell what happened. It looked like a brute force attack that just overwhelmed the password scenario. Question number 2. Hypothetically, what is the worst case scenario if biometric templates are compromised? Could we potentially face a situation similar to the target hacking with biometrics? Jim, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I think that is a question that it's a legitimate question that has been raised many times over the years. And obviously, one of the advantages of having a biometric is that you always have it with you, so that you can always verify even if somebody's stolen your template, that you are in fact the person who has the true template as opposed to a copy of it or a version of it. Additionally, again, it all comes back down to the question of what's the level of security, what's the application, so that if you're trying to get into a nuclear plant, you're going to use multiple levels of biometric, and you're not going to rely just on simply a fingerprint template. But so there's different. It's that triangle we talked about earlier. It's a trade-off between the three factors that determines what's the level that you're going to use in protecting the biometric, and what's the level of biometric that's going to be recorded for the application.
Well, thank you very much for that. And here's a question from my Biometrics Unplugged Summit partner, Maxine Most, who is one of the top analysts in our industry. With the proliferation of mobile devices and with m-commerce now surpassing e-commerce, what specific steps can and should organizations take to position biometrics as a means to mitigate rather than exacerbate privacy concerns related to mobility? And I'll throw that one open.
This is Walter. I'll take that. I think that the advent of mobile device use of biometrics as a form of local authentication for the user to access information stored on the device is a very important trend in our industry. And the next shoe to drop is the leveraging of that technology in the device to be able to perform mobile transactions such as banking or point-of-sale purchases. And for that to occur, particularly over the public internet, I think it's very, very important that the designers of such systems create a framework that can provide a level of trust through various forms of cryptographic features to ensure the authenticity of the device as well as the result of the biometric match on that device before authorizing transactions. And I know that the Fast Identity Online Alliance is an example of an organization that has worked very hard to address those concerns by building a trusted framework. So I think that's a prerequisite. It's not the biometrics, it's the framework in which the biometrics work that will make mobile commerce practical for mobile users.
If I could just weigh in for just a sec, this is Chris. I also think that this mobile devices raise a sort of another one of these things where biometrics can enable a privacy violation rather than being a privacy violation themselves. And of course, that's a very personal issue of stalking. If I'm a stalker and I cannot identify an individual who I, for whatever crazy reason, have fixated on, potentially being able to create a face template of that person, a photograph and a face template, and use that for identification could be a real and serious issue in violating that individual's privacy. Now, again, that is a bad actor, but the fact is that these technologies can be used by bad actors in ways that are that harm people. So I think as we think about all of these things, the industry has I hope, will embrace its responsibility to think about the bad applications and think about the measures that are necessary to either prevent that or encourage laws that would say that such a conduct is illegal.
Chris, this is Walter. I'll respond also by saying that what we would hope is that through voluntary codes of conduct and through the very force of commercial enterprises that bring to market applications that are privacy threatening, that they suffer the consequences of having the public turn their backs on their offerings because they don't believe that such technologies are appropriate in use. And so the voice of the consumer, they'll vote with their feet and their pocketbook to take such systems off the market. An example would be the Google Glass application that allowed you to take a surreptitious facial photograph and search public images in order to identify a person. Right. That product was discussed but never actually made it to the market because there was so much pushback.
And Walter, and that's a great example and a good hope. I would say, though, that if you've got face templates floating around about lots of people that are outside of their control. The fact is that the potential application of taking a photograph and converting that into a template may not be a terribly expensive or pricey application and may be within the reach of everyone. It's the database itself that may be the sort of expensive build, so you need to control those templates and you need to give individuals the ability to control those templates.
Yeah, I agree, but it's very difficult to do so legislatively through laws. I think that they become very difficult to understand how they would be applied because there are a myriad of applications that and such legislation is almost fraught with unintended consequences. It may stifle innovation, it may hurt technology inventions that would be very useful and beneficial to society because of a concern in one other area of an application that might be brought forward. So we're very cautious about looking for the solution always by drafting legislation. We think that probably is not a workable way to approach this, and I know you don't agree.
I was going to say, you know, in this
and
country,
I hate to cut this off at this one, but we got a lot of questions coming in, so I just want to ask another quick one here because this is kind of important. There are a lot of questions around this particular issue. How do biometrics answer the problem of irrevocability? If my fingerprint is spoofed, is there no turning back?
Yeah, this is Walter. I'll take that one. If the biometric data is compromised, we all understand that it can't be reset like a password, at least not in its current implementation. So everyone asks, how is the industry addressing this concern? Well, first, let me put it in context. Compromised passwords and tokens are very easy to exploit. Compromised biometric data is difficult to exploit, so they're not equivalent. An attacker must figure out how to insert biometric data into a system since that person doesn't share your biometric characteristics. The biometric sensor is not at all equivalent to the keyboard or card reader that a stolen card or PIN number could be used to enter. The biometric sensor captures an image directly from the presentation of a human characteristic, which the perpetrator wouldn't have. Stored biometric data is typically in template form, and that's been extracted from an acquired image obtained by a sensor. So there's really not a practical way to present a biometric template to a sensor in its rawest form. Now, if you use fake biometrics, somehow you've taken a fingerprint, latent print off of the glass and made a rubber finger out of it. That would be concern for some unsupervised or remote access applications. And we now have technology that presents liveness in the sensor as an option or as a feature so that the sensor can determine if the actual presented biometric sample is real. But biometrics is unique from PINs or passwords. For one thing, biometric data is often not really a secret. We don't think of a face of a person as being a secret. It's in the public. And even a fingerprint, although it's not obvious, it certainly wouldn't be considered a secret. Well,
Walter, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off there. I want to keep asking some more questions. Here's another one. If we used an ISO 19794-2 template, which is publicly available, so all they need to do is replace your template with theirs, and then they would have your identity. Jim, can you jump in on that one? Jim, are you there?
I'll take it.
Okay,
Peter.
Walter, yep. Try.
The simple solution is digital signatures. When you store biometric data objects in a record, they should be signed digitally so that if they are altered or modified or replaced, the digital signature check would be failed. And so that's the simple answer for integrity checking of any biometric record that's been properly collected and enrolled and then altered later by a hacker.
Thanks for that. And then here's another one. How has the use of multimodal biometric devices helped protect end-user privacy?
Is Jim still around? If not, I'll take it.
Okay, Walter, yep.
Okay, multimodal biometrics, meaning that you are challenged for more than one type of biometric sample to be presented before access is granted or some transaction is consummated, such as presenting your fingerprint first and then followed by an iris scan or something like that. Those types of implementations not only require more than one type of technology, they may be more expensive and they may be more time-consuming and inconvenient to actually use, but they may provide a higher level of integrity and security in the process. So I think you have to do the trade-off balance between convenience and rapid processing in order to gain the higher level of security, because then the attacker obviously would have to spoof or defeat two types of biometrics. That would be extraordinarily difficult. There is one example where you have a single presentation of a finger that not only produces a fingerprint match, but also produces a match of the vein pattern in the finger itself, all in one presentation. That's kind of a novel and interesting approach that one of the suppliers has out on the market today.
Thanks, Walter. We have a lot of questions. This is obviously a very hot topic, but at this stage, I think that concludes our questions. But this discussion will continue at our Biometrics Unplugged Executive Summit at the beautiful Tampa Museum of Art on September 15th, where Samsung, Experian, the Bank of America, and Jennifer Lynch, staff attorney and privacy specialist at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, will be presenting on the topic of mobility at the crossroads of commerce and privacy. I'd like to thank all of our panelists today, and also don't forget that the opening IBIA reception will take place immediately following at the Art Museum from 5 to 7 on Monday the 17th. You don't want to miss that. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, NEC, BioKey, Safran Morpho, and Cognitech for their continued support. I'd also like to thank the IBIA and especially Tova Ladir for taking such a proactive leadership role on this important topic. Stay tuned for the next IBIA special webinar presentation in November. This webinar has been recorded and will be available at mobileidworld.com. Thank you for attending, and see you in Tampa in 10 days. This is the end of the presentation.